The town of Coldwater, Pennsylvania, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where the grocery store clerk remembered your order, and the sheriff still made house calls. It was October 17th, 1975, the last day anyone ever saw 18-year-old Evelyn Harper alive. That night was marked in the town's memory forever, not because of what they saw, but because of what they didn't. Evelyn wasn't the kind of girl anyone expected to vanish. Bright, responsible, with a laugh that carried across the bleachers at every high school football game. She had just graduated the summer before and taken a part-time job at the local library. Her parents said she wanted to save money for college, something no one else in her family had ever attempted. The last time Evelyn was seen was at a gas station on the edge of town. The clerk, a man named Frank Talbot, later testified that she pulled in around 9:45 p.m. to fill up her baby blue '67 Chevy Impala. He said she looked distracted, maybe even nervous, glancing over her shoulder more than once as she paid for gas. Frank thought nothing of it at the time. After all, young women traveling alone often seemed cautious. But Evelyn never made it home. The next morning, her car was found abandoned 6 miles down Route 11, parked neatly on the shoulder, as though she had simply pulled over. The driver's side door was shut, her purse still inside, untouched. The keys dangled in the ignition. The strangest detail: the car wasn't broken down. It was in perfect working order. There were no signs of struggle in or around the vehicle, no blood, no footprints leading away into the woods, no skid marks on the asphalt. It was as if Evelyn had simply vanished into the night air. Sheriff Harold Klein, a man with 20 years on the job, was baffled. He organized search parties that combed the thick woods along Route 11 for days. Volunteers carried lanterns and flashlights, their voices echoing through the trees as they called Evelyn's name. The only sound that ever came back was the wind. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered she had run away with a secret boyfriend. Others claimed she'd been abducted by a drifter passing through on the highway. A more superstitious few muttered about the woods themselves, that they had always been cursed, that people went missing there long before Evelyn. But none of these explanations satisfied her family. Her mother insisted Evelyn would never run away without saying goodbye. Her father, stoic and weathered from years at the steel mill, spent every free hour searching those woods until his body gave out. Weeks turned into months. Posters faded in the rain. Leads dried up. And yet Evelyn's absence hung over Coldwater like a shadow that would not lift. Then, in January of 1976, the first strange phone call came. The Harper family phone rang around midnight. Evelyn's mother answered, her voice tight with exhaustion and grief. On the other end was static crackling, uneven, like a bad radio signal. Beneath it, faintly came a whisper, "Mom?" That was all. By the time Mrs. Harper shouted into the receiver, the line went dead. The call was traced, but the phone company couldn't pin down a location. It seemed to originate from multiple lines at once, some as far as 50 miles away. Sheriff Klein dismissed it as a cruel prank, but Evelyn's mother swore, through tears, that it was her daughter's voice, and that was only the beginning. Over the next 5 years, calls would come irregularly, sometimes months apart, sometimes within weeks of each other. Always late at night, always the same static, sometimes a single word, sometimes just a breath. Cold, help, still here. The police never caught who was behind them. The Harper family changed numbers, but the calls followed, somehow slipping through unlisted lines. Neighbors who tried to help received them too, as if the voice was reaching out through the wires to anyone who might listen. Each call renewed hope, but also deepened the terror. Because if Evelyn was alive, where was she? And if she wasn't, who or what was speaking through the line? By 1980, the case had gone cold. The FBI briefly became involved, considering a link to other missing women along the interstate. But nothing concrete tied Evelyn's disappearance to any known suspect. Files were archived, leads were boxed away. Sheriff Klein retired, carrying the unsolved case like a personal failure to his grave. Still, the people of Coldwater never forgot. Parents warned their daughters not to drive alone at night. Travelers swore that stretch of Route 11 felt wrong, as if unseen eyes were watching from the tree line. And every so often, Someone swore they saw Evelyn's Cara blue Chevy Impala, pristine, parked by the side of the road, only to vanish when headlights swept across it. But no one ever found her. 50 years later, the case is still active. A haunting scar in the town's history. Its unanswered questions, lingering in court records and unsolved crime boards. Every few years, journalists dig it back up, writing about the girl who vanished on Route 11. But for those who lived through that night, who heard the whispers through the phone, it was more than just a mystery. It was a wound. And it was about to reopen, because in 2025, on the exact date of her disappearance, a new call came. This time, it wasn't Evelyn's family who answered. It was the Coldwater Police Department. When the phone rang inside the Coldwater Police Department on October 17, 2025, Officer Dana Rowe nearly ignored it. It was 11:46 p.m., too late for routine calls, too early for drunks being hauled in. She thought it might be another prank, the kind that bored teenagers pulled on the anniversary of Evelyn Harper's disappearance. But when she lifted the receiver, what she heard froze her in place. Static. Then, a whisper. Help! Dana's training told her it was nothing. A prank? Maybe a damaged line. But her gut told her otherwise, because the voice didn't sound synthetic. It sounded alive, fragile, desperate. And though she'd never admitted to anyone not yet, she could have sworn she heard someone whisper her name. The following morning, the Coldwater Gazette splashed the headline across its front page. 50 years later, Evelyn Harper calls again. Detective Mark Halpern, who had only recently been promoted, was assigned the case. He was a practical man, skeptical of ghost stories, but the phone records gnawed at him. The call had bounced across 3 separate relay stations in less than a second, impossible to trace. More troubling, the recording analyzed by state labs revealed something chilling. The voice matched Evelyn Harper's perfectly, but Evelyn had been gone for 50 years. Detective Halpern dove into the archives, revisiting the original case file. Dusty photographs of the Impala, grainy black hand whites of the Harper family, eyes hollowed by grief. He read through the old transcripts of the phone calls Evelyn's mother had received. The words chilled him because they mirrored the latest call almost exactly. Cold. Help. Still here. For decades, the calls had stopped. Why now? And then another piece of evidence surfaced, one that pulled the case back into the spotlight. A week after the call, a hunter named Carl Whitaker stumbled on something deep in the forest, less than 3 miles from where Evelyn's car had been abandoned. He was following a deer trail when his boot struck metal. Brushing away leaves and dirt, he found a small locket, rusted but intact. Inside was a faded photograph of Evelyn and her younger brother, smiling at the county fair. The Harper family had reported that locket missing the night she vanished. It was as if the forest had been hiding it all this time. With the discovery, rumors exploded once more. True crime forums lit up, each spinning its own theory. Some said Evelyn had been abducted and held captive for years, perhaps even into the present day. Others believed it was all a hoax, some cruel trick to keep the town in fear. But the older residents, the ones who remembered the nights of static-filled calls, whispered something darker. That Evelyn had never left Coldwater, that she was still out there, somewhere in the woods. On the 50th anniversary of her disappearance, a candlelight vigil was held by Route 11. Families gathered, holding photos of Evelyn, their breath misting in the cold autumn air. Detective Halpern attended, more to keep the peace than out of sentiment. He watched as Evelyn's now elderly brother, Thomas Harper, lit the final candle. His hands trembled, not just with age, but with something unspeakable fear. As the vigil ended, the group began to walk back toward town. But Thomas stayed behind. He stared at the woods, expression tight, as though listening for something. When Halpern approached and asked if he was all right, Thomas said something that unsettled him more than anything in the case file. She's not gone. She never left. And now she wants us to follow. That night, just past midnight, another call came. This time it went not to the police station, but to a teenager named Rachel Myers, who lived less than a mile from the original crime scene. Rachel was home alone when the landline rang. Static first, then the same whisper. Rachel told investigators she'd heard something else too, something faint in the background that none of the adults wanted to believe. A woman crying, and a second voice, Low, male, sane, don't. The town began to spiral into unease. Reports poured in of strange activity near Route 11. Headlights that blinked out when cars drew closer. Shadows moving in the tree line. The sound of footsteps pacing just beyond sight. One driver swore he saw a woman in a blue dress on the roadside, only for her to vanish when he slowed to help. Detective Halpern tried to keep order, but even he felt the tension. Evelyn Harper had been missing for 50 years, but somehow she was more present than ever. And then came the twist that turned Coldwater upside down. While re-examining Evelyn's car and storage, Halpern noticed something overlooked all those years ago. Beneath the driver's seat, lodged deep in the seam of the carpet, was a small, folded piece of paper. Forensics revealed it had been there since the 70s, aged but untouched. On it, written in Evelyn's neat handwriting, were just 4 words. "He won't let me go." The discovery ignited a storm. Who was he? A boyfriend? A kidnapper? A stranger? Halpern dug deeper, uncovering whispers of a man named Richard Cole, a mechanic who had worked near the gas station in 1975. Cole had a record minor assaults, harassment complaints, and he'd abruptly left town days after Evelyn disappeared. He'd never been questioned thoroughly. But here was the most chilling fact. Richard Cole died in 1997, buried in Coldwater Cemetery. So if Evelyn was still calling, who was keeping her from leaving? The final breaking point came when the calls changed. On October 31st, Halloween night, the police received a recording unlike the others. Still static, still faint, but this time clear enough that everyone in the room froze. It was Evelyn's voice again, only she wasn't whispering, she was screaming, "Get me out!" And in the background, that same low male voice, "She's mine." The line went dead. Detective Halpern stood in silence, the receiver trembling in his hand. 50 years of mystery, 50 years of silence, and now screams from the grave. He realized the truth that night. Evelyn Harper's case was not just unsolved, it was unfinished. And the woods of Coldwater were waiting.